football game. I'm at the grocery store.
What?
I'm at the combination football game and grocery store.
Wait, you're at the football game
What?
and the grocery store?
I'm at the combination football game and grocery store. Groceries through Instacart, delivered to my door. I don't have to choose between football and the grocery store.
My guest is John Foster. The website, johnfosterufos.com. I've spoken with John before. You can check that out in the archives. I wanted to get back with him because there's so much right now coming up in the way of the UFO topic. His story is extraordinary because he experienced decades of UFO up-close and personal contact, ETs and UFOs, and also talks about how he would be present and he could see it and others couldn't. Time would stand still. There are a lot of elements to his experience that make it fascinating and also imply that there is a hidden, in terms of our reality, component at work, at large, influencing humans. So as we start, I'm just going to get into talking about what it is that made him unique, and it seems that some people have a higher awareness or ability to be able to connect, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily higher, but it was that for some reason I was chosen to do certain things throughout my life, and they were somewhat orchestrated. My education and like what they called conditioning. Okay.
Yeah.
When I look back and remember all those things that happened and all the things that happened during what I would call normal life, they were all connected. For instance, I didn't want to go to college, and my folks insisted I go to college, and there were UFO encounters that somewhat made that happen. There's a lot of little idiosyncrasies that you could throw in a line of logic to prove that it is absolutely true if you were there and you experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
For instance, at the grade school playground encounter, which is chapter 2 in the book Imminent Discovery, there was a period there when I was being taken into the saucer, the windowed saucer, what I call the windowed saucer. First of all, they gave us, they went through a sort of a ceremony ritual while I was standing there before I went into the craft. And I later found out that it was very, very similar to Masonic ceremony. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they just flat out told me that I should join the boys' auxiliary organization of the Masonic Lodge, which is the D. Malays. And then they told me it was time to enter the saucer. So there was a man with me that I call the guide, who had been with me from when I started towards the saucer. Okay, and it's a fairly complicated path that to get there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, as we approached the saucer, there were a couple of ramps, and we went up a couple of ramps, and at certain points, there was a little lizard-like or alligator-like creature that addressed us and asked us questions. And my guide, not I, gave formal responses like it was memorized.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Which is similar to some Masonic ceremonies. And then we would get up a little further, and he would ask another question. My guide would give a response. And then we went, I was taken somewhere. I was disoriented. It was still in the saucer, and I saw 3 or 4 of the little alligator-like beings floating in midair. Mm. And I was told they were in charge of my lifelong education and development. And I would also add to that conditioning and protection, okay, because of analyzing some other encounters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is getting a little complex. Am I too complex?
No, it helps to, I think, lay out that it isn't just you and one ET. And not only that, we don't know if it's an ET. It could be a transdimensional, interdimensional, giving you a picture of something that you won't, I think, reject or be afraid of. what you're describing, it wasn't threatening, or
but
did you?
It was threatening.
Okay, all right.
If you know what I mean. But now this is important in analyzing human life on Earth. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the encounters took place when there were normal emotional happenings, arguments, frightening episodes. That was frightening that night. Well, Leo Sprinkle, PhD of the University of Wyoming, he's a professor emeritus. Ida Canterberg, who is a hardcore UFO contactee, and Jean Parnell, who got her first, she was the first to get her PhD on UFO contactee studies from the University of Wyoming. Well, they all had done studies, which would be psychological studies and physical studies and otherwise, and they found that a lot of the encounters, if not most, occur when things are in an upheaval emotionally.
Yeah, chaotic.
Yeah. Chaotic.
Yes.
So sometimes the craft and the boys and so forth create a chaotic atmosphere before things start to happen. Okay.
Yes.
And of course, that's one of the natural things that's happening now when the federal government comes out and says, well, UFOs might be real. So people are afraid, and they start to wonder. That, I believe, tunes them into what you might call a higher awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so they open up to new possibilities. As far as judging the value of any of that, I don't think it's any higher value than anybody else that lives a completely simple physical life. Their life and their thoughts, every instant of their life is as valuable as anything or anyone in the history of humankind. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And the thing is, we have such a a lack of terminology to describe these experiences and to describe why somebody would see it and somebody else wouldn't. What you're saying is that somebody, just because they don't have the experience and can't see it, it doesn't mean they're any less valuable as a human being. However, when someone who does see it is discounted by others because they can't see it, that's where it gets complicated, because the reality doesn't change. It still happened. And how do we reconcile that, I guess, is my question.
That's why I wrote, in my email to you, I wrote, by the way, did you tell your audience that I have some dementia? Sometimes I don't remember common words, and so hopefully I'll be forgiven for that.
You're fine. Yeah, you're fine. In terms of people who are able to see it and people who aren't.
Yeah. First of all, I think you have to want to know. Okay.
Yes.
Some people I know don't want to know. My wife doesn't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She thinks it's caused more problems than it helped us. And we did separate for 18 months at one time in the early 90s because we couldn't function together.
Mm-hmm.
And this was driving me crazy. I had heart attacks because of the fear, anger, frustration, and so forth of remembering all of this almost at once. It took me, I remember the Bethany Grade School playground encounter, which lasted over 2 hours from early spring of 1986 until late summer or early fall of 1986. And then the memories just started flooding back. I would remember at night, during the day at work, whatever I was doing, I was remembering encounters. They just ended up being an enormous number of encounters from the time I was 2 or 3 years old until that very summer of 1986 when I explained the experience at Maloney Lake and south of North Platte, Nebraska.
That would have been difficult for her, though, because you were not the same person that she knew. All of a sudden, this part of you, which is a completely different, on a whole different wavelength, is front and center, and you're having to reconcile that.
Yeah, right. And I would stay up all night sometimes trying to reconcile it.
Yeah.
Latter part of February, first part of March, I could not remember another encounter. So I figured I had remembered almost everything that had happened to me throughout my life up until that time, and I was 50 years old. Yeah, 50 years old. Well, then in 1988, I had met Leo Sprinkle and Fowler Jones, who was a psychologist for the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Kansas Medical Center in Kansas City. He was also investigated UFOs because he had people like me come across his desk, and he was studying what in the heck that might be. And he also ended up being the head of the Psychic Studies Institute in Kansas City and also on the board of the Monroe Institute eventually.
This is where it gets more intense. You accept the invitation to talk about your life and your experiences, and things start to unravel.
Fowler, he met me in one of the Leo Sprinkle's Rocky Mountain Conference on UFO Investigation in Laramie. He held one every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I met Fowler out there, and he kind of took me under his wing and was really curious. And so in August, he called me and asked me to speak to the Psychic Studies Institute, scheduled for, I believe it was November or October. As soon as he asked me, I felt adrenaline flush throughout my body like crazy. It was horrible.
Is that panic?
Well, I suppose, yeah, part of it would be panic, but it was anger, frustration, all the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I started developing a pain in my solar plexus. I went and gave the talk in November, and I took NAS, the tablets, and aspirin, and I felt fine during the talk, and then started having the pains again, came home, and had a massive heart attack and heart surgery. The heart surgery failed, and I lost over half my heart. I have about a third of a heart left. I had remembered doing that during the Bethany Grade School encounter, where I was on the examination table, and there was a short, bald man there that told me I would have heart attacks and heart surgeries in the future. And he said, but not to worry, because you would survive and but I would be restricted. And that's exactly what happened some 38 years later.
Yeah, in your 80s. So that is another example of having information prior to that is spot on with what you experience in your life. This suggests there's another element that they have a mastery or an understanding of time that we have yet to figure out.
Yeah, it's like everything exists at all at one time in eternal time,
mm-hmm.
but we are aware and we experience linear time, and we have a choice at every second. We have to make choices. That's the way the human psyche is made up. In other words, you have to choose what you're going to do, whether it's subconscious or conscious, the next second. And like I'm searching for words now, and so I have to make a choice what I'm going to say.
Yes.
Well, that's all been laid out, allegedly in eternal time. So it's like we know we have, we think we know we have a spiritual body that's inside of our physical body, and that can exist outside of the physical body. And that my daughter and I somewhat proved that, because at Dillon Lake, which I don't know what chapter it is in the Discovery Chapter 1, but her brother and I were coaxed out of our bodies or forced out of our bodies at Dillon Lake in Colorado, and we went out over the water. And a voice was controlling me, and another voice was controlling them. We couldn't see anybody, and we moved. I couldn't see them; they couldn't see me, but we could hear each other. And we went to a craft, and we were told to do certain things in the craft, and then we decided to try to escape. And so we went off to another part of the lake, and the voice laughed at us and said, "There's no way you can escape." And
we know where you are.
yeah. And I was shown buildings that I was to be involved with, design and construct in the future. And the kids were just having a ball. I mean, they were extremely excited, screaming and yelling and laughing, and it was just a complete free feeling. And anyway, the voice finally convinced us that we had to come back, and So I remember floating back. The kids went their direction towards their bodies, and I went my direction towards my body, which was a little bit different.
Okay, wait. So what did they experience? What were they so excited about? Just being out of the body and playing? What did they tell you?
Well, I assume that it's the feeling of being free.
Mm-hmm.
You're just completely, totally free. And that started, you want me to go through that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is at Dillon Lake. We were along the shore, and I was probably 10, 15 yards away from the kids. Brad was along the shore at the water, piling up rocks, and Curry was just kind of fiddling around with something. There was a sequence of things that we saw in the water, and I won't go through those, but we saw two crafts manifest out over the lake at one point, and one was a dish-shaped craft with two headlights, and it came up and hovered right in front of Carrie, and we heard a voice talking to her. And then the craft all of a sudden zipped over and hovered in front of me, and of course that grabbed my attention, but I could hear in the background that kids just screaming and yelling and laughing and having such a good time. I couldn't understand their words.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice told me to, this is making a long story short, to pop out of my body. They wanted me to pop out of my body, and I had to do it right there and then. And I refused because I didn't know who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, okay, well, if you don't do it, we're going to do it for you. And he used the word we.
Oh.
And so I felt myself move forward and then down and to the left towards the ground. And I was sort of in the weeds or in the, it was kind of like sagebrush or something. And I looked up and I saw this tall dude with a cowboy hat on, and I wondered who that was. And I asked the kids, who is that? And they laughed at me and they said, well, that's you. And so I finally realized I was out of body, okay?
Yeah.
And then their voice took charge of them and herded them off out over the lake, and mine took charge of me. And I remember floating out, and he just coaxed me on,
okay.
like just come on this way, and so forth. And I finally went to a craft, and they told me to get inside and go by one of the windows and kneel down and concentrate on what I was to do in the future. Well, there was a building that manifested outside. It was a 3 to 5 story building, and they said I would be involved in the design and construction of that building, and so on and so on and so on. It's just a tremendous amount of information.
You, throughout your life, have had to kind of go back and forth on whether this makes sense and how to live it, because you met some of the other people that Timothy Beckley, somebody who was affiliated with him, showed up at one of the meetings you went to with the familiar strangers. And this had to be challenging because half or a lot of our society says UFOs aren't real at this point. It says, and then you have had encounters with people who know exactly what you're talking about because they've had the same experiences. We're just now with some of the recent media, and I mean recent as in this year, having military and higher officials say, this is something we have been kept from knowing intentionally. And part of that's because they don't know how to deal with it. But all of a sudden, now you're at a different point in your life where maybe there's actually some more receptivity to what you have to say. Does that make sense? Or is there any kind of validation with what's been going on for you your entire life?
Yeah, it is, although I have some mixed emotions, you might say. Of course, there were times throughout my life where the military did admit that there were things that they couldn't explain. About the Project Blue Book that they tried to,
right. Yeah.
they tried to fool us that what we were seeing is just normal,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was always interested sort of in the unknown and what lie over beyond the next hill of understanding. And that's why I was a somewhat good research and development engineer in the aerospace field, even though I didn't have a degree, because I was always questioning the next step and what the next reality is on a particular project. That training in engineering actually helped me in understanding or being open to what came to my mind when I was remembering things that happened in the past. And of course, there were PhDs and professors and scientists that thought I was lying or that I was imaginative and so forth.
Yeah, you said that with Whitley Strieber. At one point you connected with him. He thought, it was impossible. Your experiences just didn't factor in, and you were not legit.
Yeah, I counted the number of times that the craft appeared to me from the time I was born that I could remember until 1986, that last encounter. And it numbered over 3,000. And Whitley didn't want to understand that what I was explaining are the manifestations, not what you would call an encounter.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, some days there might have been 30 manifestations, other days maybe one. So you can't really say that there was, one was an encounter and the others weren't, so he didn't want to take time to understand. And of course I can understand that because he was trying to tell his story. I gave a talk to the 2001 International UFO Congress. It was a 90-minute talk, and of course I couldn't get my whole story in, but most of the UFO researchers and investigators that I met at the conference thought I was lying or that I was imaginative, that they couldn't accept my story. I have a video of my talk on johnfosterufos.com on the homepage. So that kind of, gives another overview of what happened to me as far back as I remember, at least 2 or 3 years old. So it would be 48 years.
So much has changed since 2001, though. Oh my gosh! At that point when people were saying no, this isn't real, to now when we've got investigations and explorations and at least one big, huge research study of experiencers with about 5,000 respondents describing their experiences. And when you're saying that they took you out of your body and said you must pop out, and you said I don't want to do that, and they said fine, we'll do it for you. I've had that experience where I was popped out of my body in order to show me something. I didn't know that they could do that. I didn't say no. I just said, whoa, okay, here I am.
Well, see, it sort of convinces me that they're pretty much in charge, and that's why I don't divorce what's happening now, what happened to me, from God or the what's written in the Bible. I just believe we understand more exactly what they were talking about in the old days. And of course, as humans develop, we cling on to things that we think we understand, but we only understand it within certain limits.
In the book, Real Visitors, Voices from Beyond and Parallel Dimensions, that's Brad Steiger and Sherry Hansen Steiger, the part where your work is included, the book Life Itself, Francis Crick, discoverer, co-discoverer of DNA. His theory, we basically have been seated here. Did you come to that conclusion as you were trying to figure out, trying to make sense of things, that, hey, maybe there's some other answers here from science that we still have to start reconciling?
Oh, yeah, and we're decade after decade, we understand more and more and more. If you really think about it, when we say we, we're really talking about individuals, and even though we use words to try to describe certain concepts, if you have 5 people that hear the same words, you're going to get 5 different interpretations.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the really important thing is to realize, this is part of the summary of what I went through, is that the important thing is to know that reality is within your own self. It's in your mind, it's in your emotions, and it's in your memory of your mind and your emotions. So each one of us is different, and every day we have to make a choice. Every second we have to make a choice on what we're going to do next. And each one of us chooses something at least slightly different and under a different umbrella, you might say, or different concepts. And so the important part of life is living life and feeling and knowing realizing that the person beside you is also doing that, but they're somewhat different, at least, than you are. And, or, in eternal philosophy, you might say, big is small, bad is good, black is white. Everything is of equal value in one way or another. There's always exception to a rule. The thing that is important is to live your life, and part of living your life is to perceive what reality is, or just to live it spontaneously. My wife lives it spontaneously and is a wonderful person and is a joy to be around. I, on the other hand, question everything. So that causes conflict sometimes.
It's complementary. It's you guys complement each other with the opposites of the in the moment, and the other one going, okay, this has to have a definition. This has to have a rule. This has to have some kind of basis. And she's going, just enjoy yourself.
Yeah, exactly. We started arguing on our first coffee date, and we haven't stopped since. We've been married over 60 years.
Well, there's one thing you agree on. Okay, you're still together.
Yeah, she's a wonderful gal, and she would make you feel good if you just sit down and talk to her. That's worth as much as knowing everything there is to know,
There's another element of this. You were given some information about the future. Were there some things that you were shown that we need to be aware of, or that it might be interesting to note, whether we're aware of it or not?
It has to do with. It does and it doesn't have to do with me personally.
Okay.
In other words, I was shown during the time travels a number of ways in different locations, an ET human project that was oriented primarily towards helping an influx of people who would migrate into our area in the future. And this would include people from south of the border in other countries, also people living here in Middle America, and people that would move to Middle America because of something in the future. And I was shown specific locations and specific buildings I was to help design and construct. The other, who I call the familiar strangers, the people I saw in the craft when we went on the time travels, and most of them were involved in teaching because some of the buildings were schools. A lot of the buildings were schools and spiritual learning centers, you might say, okay? Learning how to develop your metaphysical talents and spiritual talents. And there were different places around the Midwest, especially, that would have a board that would be in charge of the building and the teaching and so forth.
My guest, John Foster, the website, johnfosterufos.com. There are 3 books if you want to find out more about this in detail. And the other show is also in the Wendy's Coffee House archives at Audio Boom. We cover some other topics in emails, and I will post those at wendyscoffeehouse.com. So when you remembered having experiences, you weren't by yourself, you remembered other people, and you call them the familiar strangers. Can you set that up?
In the spring of 1987, Shirley MacLaine's friend, who she wrote about in the book Out on the Limb, was going to be in Omaha to give a lecture, and a friend of my daughter's, the oldest daughter, the writer, they wanted to hear Shirley MacLaine's friend speak. And so they wanted me to join them, so I did join them. And when I walked into the room, I started noticing people all around me that I recognized, and it just freaked me out. And so as the fellow gave his speech, I got up and stood at the side of the crowd looking at the people, and I recognized so many of them. There was a group of people up by the stage where he was speaking, and they seemed extremely familiar. So anyway, we left, and I wanted to talk to the guy, but he was talking to other people, and I didn't have a chance. So later, my daughter told me there was a woman that she worked with that wanted to meet me. And so we met at a coffee shop, and I told her part of my story, and she said she was a spiritual person, and her guides had told her to go to the Yucatan Peninsula. And while she was there, she was told to pick up some rocks and give it to a certain person, and she didn't know who that was. Well, when we were talking at the coffee shop, she said I was that person, and she gave me the rocks. Told me there were a group of people that met weekly in talking about their own experiences that were UFO and spiritual and otherwise, and that I should go meet with them and tell my story. So my daughter and I decided to go to the next meeting, and as we drove up to the building, I began to recognize the building, and it freaked me out so much that I decided I wouldn't go, and I started driving up the valley, and I started recognizing other things. Allegedly, I had never been there before. So I decided to go back and try to find out what it was, and nobody answered the door when we knocked. And we went in and nobody was there. All of a sudden, it came to me, I know where to go. So we walked through a small room, large room, and there was a door towards the back, and I knew that was the door. So I opened the door and walked in. There were 8 to 12 individuals in there, and I recognized every single one of them, and they recognized me. And I started to tell my story, and they were familiar with parts of the story, not all the story. Mm-hmm. And anyway, as things developed, and we met sometimes 2-3 times a week, I started seeing more things. People did some of the exact same things I saw them do during the time travels. They would say some of the same things that I had heard them say during the time travels. People had been told about the project in different ways, particularly the first building we were to construct. Just so happened that somebody bought the land where I was shown the exact spot where the building should be built. And when I saw the land and the lay of the land, it just freaked me out because it was exactly the same. The land is still owned, I believe, by someone that's connected. Somebody asked me about a 3 to 5 story building. I was remembering at that time part of the Sheridan Creek Fireguard Cabin time travel, which is in part of the emails. We finally ended up at the site during that time travel, and it was at this same location. There were a lot of things happened between me and the familiar strangers after my recollections. And then I decided this was sort of breaking up families because people would just go nuts and get into the spiritual stuff and divorce their husbands or whatever and leave their families, leave their kids. And I didn't think that was not a good sign. And so I decided not to participate. And I had been, during that, I believe it was the Sheridan Creek Fireguard Cabin time travel, I was with a friend, and we were talking with either a man or the voice. And he said to the voice, he said, well, what if he decides he doesn't want to participate? And the voice or the man said, well, if we wouldn't like that at all, but because we have trained him to do it, but we also have somebody else, if he decides not to participate, who can take his place. So I knew then that,
you could stop.
Yeah, I could stop. And that's what I ultimately did, was to stop. Now, the land is there, and there are all kinds of spiritual people that go there and hold whatever they do, ceremonies and so forth. And there are other people, possibly the one who is to take my place has already arrived. But the building has not been built, the first building. It can still be built, and it was primarily a high school to provide education for primarily the Central American orphans and South American orphans and Mexican orphans.
So we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet.
I don't know, but I am about to the end of my life, so I'm pretty much resolute that I will not be a part of it. What I was shown, and I'm just coming to grips with that. It's kind of hard to shuck all of that because that started when I was at least 2 or 3 years old. So
I also want to go back, because we're going to wrap up here, but I want to go back and you started all this by saying, I mean, there was a point in your life when you'd absolutely had it with whatever was happening, and you said, I want to know more. I want to know more. And then this all unfolded. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I knew something was happening. It was sort of haunting me all my life, something that was there that I couldn't understand. And so I just got, this was in 1984, I believe. I had my flood of recollections in the early spring of 1986, okay? I can remember standing in a bedroom looking out the window and saying, okay, I said it out loud, that I want to know what it is, even if it kills me. And I prayed to the Father of Christ, the creator of our universe. Nothing triggered it. My kids and I always were wondering about UFOs. We'd lay out late at night, and we did see some strange lights in the sky that would turn right angles, which airplanes don't do.
Yeah, that's right.
And, and some other things and so forth. I had to wait 2 years, but during those 2 years, I was still in engineering, and I had left the building business. I had my own building business one time, designing and building homes. And I was working for another friend who was an excellent engineer in designing circuits and so forth. So I waited that 2 years, and then I started having my first memories, and it took me from early spring of 86 to latter part of August or early September to remember the Bethany Grade School playground encounter, where the 30 to 50 people were present. Anyway, if anybody doubts this, they can read the writings of the witnesses. Some of them are on the homepage overview of John's Encounters. That's item 6 in the black strip on the website. And if you're interested in everything they say, it's in volume 2 of the book Imminent Discovery.
My impression is that we need to develop our own skills, the telepathic awareness. Like when you said you went to the square there in Santa Fe and the Native Americans said, we're leaving, see you, bye.
Yeah. Yeah, but you might be interested to know that we also stopped at the Indian Museum right after that, and they wouldn't allow us to go in because of me, that I was attracting the spirits, and they didn't know whether they were good or evil.
Yeah, you had a little baggage. A little baggage.
Yeah, and of course, my fundamental Christian sisters believe that it's all satanic. One of the convincing things for me was that what I experienced is described almost perfectly in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelations at different places, as far as describing the phenomenon that happened.
Even in some of your stories, when you were saying there were photographs of these clouds behind you, in the photograph, we're just now beginning to say that isn't a malfunction of the camera. That's something happening.
I can tell you that I believe the disappearance of the photographs in both cases were programmed. Those people were doing what they were supposed to do and taking the photographs.
Yeah.
I can draw the photographs.
That's why I love your website. I love the pictures. I love the one that I have where the UFO is coming out of the cloud. This is how things happen here. If you are open to knowing there's more to reality than meets the eye, then that's the next step of, okay, what else is there? And John, I really appreciate you talking about this, and I appreciate your wife for humoring me, for asking you to do this.
She's used to it, and we've talked over at length. You take care of yourself.
John Foster, UFOs. There's a lot more here than meets the eye. Stay curious.
Instacart shoppers know groceries. They know that you can't make guacamole with rock-hard avocados. They know how to quickly find those peanut butter pretzels you can never find. And they keep you in the know by giving you updates about your order along the way. Let Instacart shoppers help take shopping off your plate so you can get time and energy back for what really matters. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Ay, mija, abuelita's on her way and I still need to shop for the party.
No worries. Let's order through Instacart.
¿Insta qué?
Sí, Emma. We can order groceries and more online and get everything delivered in as fast as an hour.
Everything for dinner? Carne, tortillas, limas, plátanos.
Claro. Anything else?
Just make sure the plátanos are ripe.
Get groceries delivered same day with Instacart so you have more time for family. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply.